Gonzaga's best teams have always had 2 point guards, and Mark Few has a guy in mind to make that happen once again next season.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Thursday. Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Randy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, folks, and once again, live here Thursday afternoon, a little later than usual, about 3:50 p.m. Pacific time. I say that because there's rumors swirling around the Gonzaga space right now, so I want to timestamp this show as we don't have anything official regarding any transfer portal additions for Gonzaga. But we are going to talk about a couple of players, or at least one player that Gonzaga has recently contacted in the transfer portal, in USC guard Desmond Claude. We'll talk about that to start the show. Also want to point out Gonzaga did contact Andrei Stojakovic, who we spoke about, I believe, on Tuesday's episode of Locked On Zags. Stojakovic already taken a visit to Illinois, but is being pursued by Gonzaga. Would be an incredible fit in Spokane were he to come to campus. But we're not talking about Stojakovic today. We're talking Desmond Claude, and then we're going to close out the show with our season review episode for Ryan Nembhard. We're going to talk about his time in college before he got to Gonzaga, his 2 seasons in Spokane, specifically his most recent season, and the multiple records that he set with assists. And then we're going to close out the show talking about his future, what that might look like, and then kind of how Gonzaga is going to replace him on the roster for next year. We'll, of course, have one more show this week coming your way on Friday. Hopefully have some fun stuff to talk about there. We will see. We want to talk about Desmond Claude, a name that will probably be somewhat familiar to Gonzaga fans, particularly fans who checked out Gonzaga's exhibition game against USC before the season began. He had a really big game against the Zags in that one. He's 6'5", rising senior guard from New Haven, Connecticut. He was a top 100 high school prospect who began his career at Xavier under Coach Sean Miller in the Big East. His first year at Xavier, he played a big role, 21 minutes per game in all 35 games, but wasn't a particularly impactful player right away. That was a pretty loaded Xavier team for Coach Miller. He averaged about 5 points, 2.5 boards, about two assists coming off the bench, shot just under 30% from 3 and about 47% on his 2-pointers. But then the next year he was given an opportunity to kind of rise into a bigger role for Coach Miller's Musketeers. And that's exactly what he did. Claude stepped into that bigger role. And I remember we were kind of covering the Big East on the Locked On College Basketball show. There was a lot of rumbling about, hey, this is a big time breakout candidate in the Big East. And again, he fully delivered on that in his second and final season at Xavier. Averaged 16.6 points per game, a little over 4 boards, a little over 3 assists, played about 34 minutes a night, took about 3.5 3-point attempts per game, but and we'll talk about this in a second, because unfortunately, a few of the players Gonzaga has been connected to in the transfer portal lately don't exactly check what I consider one of the major boxes for the Zags in terms of 3-point shooting. Like I said, Claude shot just under 30% as a freshman, but as a sophomore in his best season to date at the collegiate level, he shot 23.9%. That's right, 24% from 3 in a season where he averaged over 16 per game. It's pretty incredible how effective of a scorer he was in other aspects of his game without having that 3-point shot. Was about 49% on 2-pointers on about 11 attempts per game. He was also about 80% from the free throw line on 5 attempts per game. So getting about 4 points per game from the line certainly helped. After that season at Xavier, Claude hits the transfer portal, ends up being kind of the prize for USC and Coach Eric Musselman, who brought in, I think, 11 transfers last year. I remember that USC had the most points per game among all of their transfers averaged together, in part because they had so many transfers coming in, and in part because they just needed, they went after a lot of kind of low major guys who had high scoring averages. But Claude was a guy who'd done a lot of really good work at Xavier previously, and he came in and did kind of what I think a lot of people expected him to do at USC, which was really a pretty fantastic season for a team that did not do particularly well. They finished 14th in the Big Ten, but wasn't really because of the fault of Desmond Claude. He went out and averaged about 16 points, 3.5 boards, a little over 4 assists per game, playing 32.5 minutes per night. The three-point shooting was a career best. It still wasn't great, 30.7%. But still nice to see him significantly higher than the 23% or 24% that he shot that sophomore year at Xavier. He was also improved as a 2-point scorer from 48.5% to 53% while at USC, and his free throw shooting dipped a bit, but still over 76%. More importantly, took nearly 6 free throw attempts per game. Claude is a 6'5", big physical guard who loves to have the ball in his hands, who loves to score around the rim, who loves to get to the free throw line. He is a little bit like if Caliph Battle were a point guard type situation, because Claude is definitely a point guard. He is an on-ball player. Again, averaged over 3 assists each of the last 2 years, 4 assists this past year. So he is a point guard. But if you're talking about a player who has scoring tendencies, who has rim pressure tendencies, but who can also facilitate and handle the ball, I mean, that's kind of a perfect player for Gonzaga's 2-point guard system, the way that it operated with Josh Perkins and Nigel Williams-Goss back in 2017, the way it operated with Jalen Suggs and Andrew Nembhard in the 2020-21 season. We know this is something Mark Few and the Zags love to do, and Desmond Claude certainly fits and kind of checks a lot of those boxes. He also dominated Gonzaga in that exhibition game. It was a 96-95 loss for Gonzaga in a game that ultimately didn't count, that a lot of people didn't see. I believe it was pay-per-view for that one. But Desmond Claude, especially in the second half, basically just went down on the block and posted up Ryan Nembhard and scored at will. And it kind of exposed one of Gonzaga's bigger issues last year, which was the size the size disadvantage that backcourt had. But also it showed a skill set that Claude has that I think could be very valuable. We've seen Gonzaga utilize posts up from their guards in the past. Williams-Goss, who we just mentioned, was very good at that and did that very frequently for Gonzaga. And I think if Claude's playing in the WCC, he's going to have the ability to post up opposing guards fairly regularly. And I think that's something that, were he to come to Gonzaga, that Mark Few and the staff would want to utilize him in that role periodically during the season. A couple performances for Claude this year: 31 points in a win at Illinois, 30 points against Rutgers, and then 28 points, 8 assists in a 2-overtime win against Rutgers. That one was in the Big Ten tournament. Had 25 points, 11 assists, 5 boards in a blowout win over UW. Finished the season 12th in the Big Ten in points per game, 9th in assists. He was 3rd in turnovers. In fact, he was a turnover-prone player, which, again, if you go to Gonzaga and you're playing a bit more off the ball, that may help mitigate some of those turnover concerns for a player who had quite a few of them in his lone season at USC. Per Deshaun London of 24/7 Sports, Gonzaga is not alone in pursuing Desmond Claude, who was one of the who entered the portal on the last day to enter the portal. So just a couple of days ago, as we're recording this at 4 p.m. on Thursday. BYU, Ole Miss, Florida, Virginia, and Indiana were the other schools listed by London who are pursuing Deshaun Claude at the moment in the transfer portal. Some odd fits here. BYU already landed Rob Wright. They dropped reportedly over $3 million for the Baylor transfer, who's a pure point guard. They have AJ Dibansa, who's not a guard, but he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. They have Richie Saunders coming back. I'm not sure I see a lot of room for Claude in BYU's system, but they got some money to burn, so they could make it work. Florida also already had landed Xavier Lee from Princeton. So I'm not sure there's a ton of room for a ball dominant player like Claude at Florida either. But again, they could maybe potentially coexist, and certainly Todd Golden's reputation with guards and the fact that they just won a championship will be appealing to somebody like Claude. And then, of course, new coaches at Virginia and Ryan Odom, and Indiana and Darren DeVries. So it'll be interesting to see if they can make a big splash with a player like Claude out of the portal. As I'm recording this, just moments ago, Nick Dorn from Elon committed to Indiana. That could derail Indiana's hopes of also landing Desmond Claude, excuse me. For the fit at Gonzaga, we kind of already talked about it, but I'll get into it a little bit more briefly. He would start at the 2, and it would be a 2-point guard lineup with him and Braden Smith. Like that's the situation here. The concern is the lack of 3-point shooting between Claude, who's never been better than 31% from 3, Braden Smith, who's a fine 3-point shooter, but certainly not elite, Jalen Warley, who is allergic to taking 3-pointers. I'm not even That's barely an exaggeration. He took 7 in a full season at Florida State his last year. This man does not shoot threes. That's just not his game. So between that, you kind of are lacking in three-point shooting a little bit. I think that would be my one concern with Desmond Claude. If Steele Venters is fully healthy, I think you feel a little bit better about bringing in a player with Claude's playmaking and positional size and all the other skills, just high-level scoring that he brings, because you have some more three-point shooting elsewhere on the roster. But between Warley and Smith and Innocente, I'm worried about adding too many non-shooters to this roster in the backcourt. But I love the 2 point guard lineups. We've seen that have massive success. The 2 best seasons in Gonzaga basketball history were 2 point guard lineups. Claude and Smith together makes a lot of sense. It's not 2 6-foot point guards. You got some positional size with Claude at a hefty 6'5". So I think that this could really, really work. Claude would probably become Gonzaga's second leading scorer behind Huff or behind Ike, I would imagine. That would be the plan. You don't want to be too reliant on the 2 bigs to do all of your scoring. You need some more scoring punch from the backcourt. It's what Gonzaga is lacking on the roster right now. It's why they're pursuing players like Andrei Stojakovic and Desmond Claude, as well as their failed pursuits of players like Rodney Rice and Brendan Howson and Dan Skillings and others who were high-level scorers that Gonzaga wanted to bring into the fold. So I like the fit. I like the player a lot. It's not perfect necessarily, but if you can get a player as talented as Desmond Claude, a guy who scored 16 points a game in both the Big East and the Big Ten, you got to do it. And this would be a really, really fun fit and fun experiment for Mark Few and the Zags if Claude were to commit to Spokane. Well, we've talked a lot about a potential new point guard joining Gonzaga's roster. Now we're going to finish out the show talking about the previous point guard, Ryan Nembhard. Gonzaga's got a rich history of pass-first point guards. None of them have ever been better than what Ryan did last year. We're going to recap that incredible season for Ryan coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel's giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting super easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props, including on Ryan's brother Andrew, Chet Holmgren, Rui Hachimura, all the Zags in the NBA. And after the game tips off, you can even combine your live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Right now, the Zags are at plus 3,500 to win the national championship in 2026. If you feel like a big-time portal edition's coming and those odds aren't going to get any better for you, now might be the time. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com to claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. We're moving away from talking about transfer portal. We talked about Desmond Claude, who has been contacted by Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. I should say the Gonzaga Bulldogs. I don't know if it was Mark Few who contacted Desmond Claude, but the staff has contacted him. We talked about who he is, why he would be a great fit in Spokane. And now we want to continue our season in review series, which we haven't gotten to as quickly as I would have liked to because there has been a lot of transfer portal talk on the Locked On Zags, but want to give a kind of final goodbye, a sayonara to Ryan Nembhard, a prolific Gonzaga basketball player, even in only 2 years spent in Spokane. Ryan was initially a top 70 prospect in his recruiting class who began his career with Greg McDermott and the Blue Jays of Creighton, came from Montverde Academy in Florida, the same high school as his older brother, Andrew Nembhard, who also spent 2 years at a different school before transferring to Gonzaga. For Andrew, it was Florida. For Ryan, it was Creighton. All told, he played 64 games for the Blue Jays, averaged about 34 minutes a game, about 12 points, 4.5 assists, 3.5 boards, 34% from three. He got injured his freshman year, and I think it was an ankle injury in late February of his freshman year, missed the rest of the season, kind of derailed what was a very, very good season for the Blue Jays. Came back as a sophomore and helped lead Creighton all the way to the Elite Eight. And unfortunately was involved in what was kind of a phantom foul call on Darion Trammell, the starting point guard for the San Diego State Aztecs. at that time. I say phantom foul call in the sense that it was ticky-tack and not really a call you'd like to make at the end of games, but there was contact. It was a foul by Ryan. Darion Trammell went to the free throw line, won the game for San Diego State. They advanced their first ever Final Four. And shortly after that, Ryan Nembhard shocked everybody by entering the transfer portal. This is when it was shocking still to see really good players from really successful teams who had really good roles entering the transfer portal. It's still a little bit surprising when we see it happen now, but it's more common, obviously, in the modern, as the transfer portal has blown up, as the NIL funds have blown up in certain ways. Like, there's nobody who's really safe, and you could be a starting player on a team that went to the national championship, and people aren't going to be as shocked when you're entering the portal. But when Ryan Nembhard did it, it was a stunner. And the immediate reaction, I recall this so distinctly because I was in a parking lot at a Fred Meyer when I found out that Ryan Nembhard entered the transfer portal, and I was reading through the initial response, and everybody said, Tommy Lloyd is pulling him to Arizona. He's going to Arizona. They're offering him a bag. He's got a connection with Tommy. And I remember thinking, like, well, Gonzaga didn't have a point guard. Like, why wouldn't he consider going to Gonzaga? And the rumors persisted that it would be Arizona for a really long time, and then it wasn't. And then it was he came to Gonzaga, followed in his brother's footsteps, committed to Gonzaga right around the same time as Graham Ike. The two of them came in together for their careers at Gonzaga. Of course, Graham will be here for an extra year, but Ryan comes in, has an effective junior year, but certainly not quite as effective as his senior year. He averaged about 12.5 points, 7 assists in his junior year, about 3.5 boards as well. But it was kind of a two different years for Ryan Nembhard. And the stats don't look way different between the first half and the second half of his junior year. But from watching the games and covering that team, you could really see when things started to kind of click into place for Ryan. It's hard to learn a new system as a point guard. It's hard to learn a new system as a point guard with brand new teammates around you, many of them who are also learning the system for the first time. The only real key returner for that team was Anton Watson, and he was playing a different role. And so you kind of saw that play out. In the first 17 games, Nembhard averaged 12.5 points, 6 assists, 2.5 turnovers, about 49% on twos, only 25.5% from three. Then in the final 18 games, 12.7 points, so basically exactly the same there, but he went from 6 assists to about 8 assists. He went from 2.4 turnovers to 2.2 turnovers. His 2-point percentage improved slightly, while his 3-point percentage went from 25.5% to 39% in the second half of his junior season, his first year in Spokane. So a lot of that kind of hype for Ryan coming into his senior year was, hey, this kid looked great in the second half of his first season. And now he's going to have a full off season under his belt. He's going to be prepared for the system. Him and Graham have kind of got this yin and yang down. They figured it out. They know their roles. Everybody else, there was a lot of continuity on the roster. Ben Gregg was back. Dusty Stromer was back. Nolan Hickman, of course, was back. Like it kind of felt like, all right, we're going to see Ryan really blossom. And while Gonzaga as a whole didn't performed to expectation as a team that had 7 of their 8, key players from the previous year returning and made some big time additions in Ajayi and Caliph Battle. Like, the Zags failed to meet expectation last year. That's not a hot take. It is a bona fide fact. In fact, it's a cool take in how many other people talked about this team last year, but it is pretty obvious that this team did not meet expectation. But Ryan Nembhard did. He was incredible. I mean, absolutely unbelievably good. And I think even the best expectations for Nembhard specifically would have been maybe he can average 9 assists per game. Like, it would have been a dream to say, oh, he could average 10, but that's what he did. That's what he did. 35 games, 35 minutes per game, 10.5 points per game, 9.8 assists, about 3 boards, a little under 2 steals, shot 40.5% from 3. And we're going to get into the passing. We're going to talk about the assist numbers, but I will say this. Ryan Nembhard did not get enough credit for his dramatic improvement as a 3-point shooter. Again, as a junior, and his 2 years at Creighton, he was a below average 3-point shooter, like 33%. He wasn't a great shooter at Creighton. Then in his first 17 games in a Gonzaga uniform, he shot 25.5%. And then in the second half of that year, he shot 39%, but that kind of went under the radar because his overall season numbers weren't very good. And people kind of, when you start out not doing something very well, you tend to not get a lot of attention when you recover in that area. And yet for an entire season, Ryan Nembhard just shot 40.5% from three. And I feel like we talk so much about his passing, but a lot of the knock on him was like, oh, he's a great passer, but he's not a great defender and he's not a great scorer. And it's like, yeah, he's not an elite scorer, but he was a really good 3-point shooter last year. And I don't think that he got the credit he deserved for that in particular this past season. Mostly because of all the credit that he got was due to his passing, which was unbelievable. This is the stat that really, I think, encapsulates it more than anything else. Ryan Nembhard's junior year, he broke Gonzaga's single season assist record. He had 243 assists, which just passed Josh Perkins for the most assists in a single season in Gonzaga basketball history. Ryan Nembhard not only broke his own record this past year as a senior, he had 101 more assists than his previous record for the program. That is jaw-dropping. 243 assists broke the record at Gonzaga. And then as a senior, he racked up 344 of them. Absolutely unbelievable how effective of a passer he was this past season. It's not only blew Gonzaga's record out of the water. It is the single season record for the WCC, passing Emmett Naar from St. Mary's. It is also the 5th most ever in recorded college basketball history. Only 4 players have had more assists in a single season. Only one of those happened after 1989, and that was Kendall Marshall for the North Carolina Tar Heels in the 2011-2012 season when he had 351. Nembhard just 7 away from tying that record. Incredible, incredible stuff. Nembhard had 19 games this year where he had 10 or more assists. He had 21 games with 10 or more points. Only 13 double-doubles, in part because a lot of the games where he didn't score very much were games where he had a bunch of assists. There was a lot of 8-point, 14 assist type games from Ryan Nembhard this past year. He tied Gonzaga's single game record for assists with 16 in the regular season finale at San Francisco. He did not win the Bob Cousy Award. He was a finalist. That is the award for the best point guard in college basketball. It went to Braden Smith. I get it. It's frustrating. Ryan's passing numbers were phenomenal. In theory, that's the most important stat for a point guard. But Braden Smith, for the record, finished with the 14th most assists in a single season ever. So he was an incredible passer this last year as well. He was also a better scorer and a rebounder and overall probably a better player than Ryan Nembhard. But man, it was tough to see Ryan put up that kind of season, those kind of passing numbers, and not get that recognition at the end of the year. Alas, it is what it is. Ryan ends his career stamping his name in Gonzaga's record book, a record that's probably not going to get broken anytime super soon. And his legacy is going to live on for a long time in Spokane. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about what the future might hold for Ryan. His brother's in the NBA. Does he have a chance to follow suit and join him in the association? We'll talk about that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, did you know the Amazon Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn any TV into your gaming and equipment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Play high-quality Xbox games at the fraction of a cost of a console. And if you already have a console, no problem. A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. And maybe you're somebody who doesn't have any interest in gaming. Great news. The Amazon Fire TV Stick is the perfect go-to for all of your family's entertainment. We have one on every TV in our house, and the platform, it's super easy to use and navigate. And my favorite part, it's really customizable. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on-set devices include Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube third generation. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags, still finishing up the show with our Ryan Nembhard season review episode. We talked about his history, his 2 seasons at Creighton, his surprise decision to enter the transfer portal and surprise decision to come to Gonzaga, his junior year where we saw glimpses of the greatness, and then his senior year where he shattered Gonzaga's assist record and many other records at Gonzaga in the WCC and across the NCAA. A prolific season for Nembhard. Now we're going to talk a little bit about his future, his legacy, and how Gonzaga is replacing him on the roster. Spoiler alert, we talked a lot about that in the first segment of this show with Gonzaga's pursuit of USC transfer guard Desmond Claude. Tucking Nembhard, though, he's out of eligibility. He did not pull a Ben Gregg and throw his name in the transfer portal. So if there is some blanket ruling, which is very unlikely, that allows players to have a 5th year of eligibility, Ryan Nembhard would either return to Gonzaga or would not take up that 5th year. This is not happening. It's annoying that we have to keep talking about it, but as long as Ben Gregg's name in the transfer portal, it's just one of those things that's going to come up. But ultimately, I don't think is anything that particularly will be relevant for Gonzaga in the future. Ryan Nembhard's not coming back. Nolan Hickman's not coming back. Ben Gregg's not coming back. It's just they're all moving on with their professional careers. That is how it goes in college basketball. And until there's a hard and fast rule, there's going to be some murky confusingness with this whole situation. But Nembhard's done. He played 2 years at Creighton. He played 2 years at Gonzaga. None of them were the COVID year. There's no real mystery here. 2 of the other seniors from Gonzaga's roster, Caleb Battle and Nolan Hickman, were both invited and accepted invitations to participate in the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament, the Pit, which is kind of one of the more premier pre-draft events. There's the Pit, and then there's the G League Combine, and then there's, of course, the NBA Draft Combine. That's the big one. That's the one that's going to house the majority of players who get selected in the NBA Draft in late June. The fact that Nembhard didn't participate in Portsmouth could be that he wasn't invited, could be that he was invited and turned it down. It's going to be one of those two. I don't know which one it is, but I wouldn't read a ton into it necessarily. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets invited to the G League Combine. That's where Anton Watson was invited to the G League Combine and then ended up getting drafted late in the second round, of course, of the NBA draft. I think Nembhard's going to get some looks. He's going to get some attention. He's, again, maybe gets a combine invite or a G League Combine invite. Maybe if he plays well enough there, he gets an actual NBA draft combine invite. But at this point, he's not really showing up on mock drafts. He'll show up on big boards where people write, here are my top 100 NBA draft prospects for, the upcoming draft. And he'll be somewhere in like the 80s to 90s, kind of just like at the point when you're making a big board where you're looking for really talented senior players who are draft eligible, but who aren't necessarily going to likely end up in the actual draft. That's where Nembhard's showing up on the big boards. That's why he's not showing up on a lot of mock drafts. And it feels fairly realistic that Nembhard will be somebody who doesn't get drafted, but gets signed to a summer league deal, gets signed to an Exhibit 10 contract, gets invited into training camp, gets a legitimate opportunity to compete for a roster spot. And if he doesn't get one, he gets a chance to compete in the G League. If he plays well there, like Drew Timme did, you play well in the G League, you get promoted to the NBA club. Like that feels like a pretty realistic kind of sequence of events for Ryan Nembhard. He's going to get extra attention because of his brother, who was himself not considered a very high-level NBA draft prospect, who ended up getting drafted much higher than people expected, the first pick in the second round of the NBA draft, who then has parlayed that into a very, very successful NBA career, currently averaging 17 points a game in a playoff series for the Indiana Pacers, started every game for that team. I mean, is having a remarkable professional career. There's about 5 inches that separate Andrew and Ryan Nembhard, and unfortunately, that's a huge, monumental difference in terms of your perception from NBA scouts. Andrew's 6'5", Ryan's 6 foot. Ryan's going to measure without shoes, probably 5'11", 5'10", something. That's going to kill his draft stock. I mean, it's so unfortunate because there's not anything Ryan can do about that, obviously. But for him as an older prospect, he's already 22. He's not big. He's not a great defensive player. He hasn't proven to be a super consistent three-point shooter, scorer. He's got incredible pick and roll navigation. He's a high IQ basketball player. He would be an above average passing point guard in the NBA right now. But the rest of the skills that he has are just not NBA caliber. And I don't see him sticking in the NBA. Doesn't mean he won't get chances. Doesn't mean he won't get to realistically play in the NBA, but I don't think he sticks because of his size. And I think it's unfortunate that the modern era is so focused on height and size, because it's going to prevent them from signing a player who could be really good, but I don't think we'll get those opportunities. In terms of Nembhard's legacy, it's pretty obvious. We already spoke so much about it, so I won't get too much more into it. But the two brothers, both starting their college careers elsewhere, both transferring to Gonzaga, both spending 2 years in Spokane, both being prolific guards in a franchise, a program that has had so many great players. I'm dating all the way back to John Stockton, but even in the Mark Few era, the Dan Dickows, the Derek Rivios, the Kevin Pangoses, more recently, the Jalen Suggs, the Josh Perkins, Nigel Williams-Goss, to have had so many tremendous point guards. These Nembhards, the two of them, are two of the very best point guards we've ever had, two of the very best transfers that we've ever had. And Ryan in particular, shattering records in this program, will make sure that his legacy lives on for decades in Spokane. In terms of how Gonzaga is replacing him, it's Braden Smith, the Colgate transfer, Patriot League Player of the Year. He sat out all of last year as a redshirt entirely to learn from Ryan Nembhard. This was the plan all along. The plan has continued to go smoothly, and we'll see the fruits of that labor next season. He's going to step into that starting role. He's a 6-foot point guard. He's a good passer. He's a decent scorer. He wasn't a great three-point shooter at Colgate. A lot of the same things that were true of Ryan Nembhard are true of Braden Smith. He just spent a whole year. Again, he didn't play in games and we didn't see a lot of him, but every single day in practice, he was going up against Ryan Nembhard. He was learning from him. He was watching his mannerisms. He was learning how to operate, how to, prepare for games, and also the ins and outs of what he did on the floor, how he navigated pick and rolls, how he navigated certain defensive sets, everything that Ryan Nembhard was able to do last year. Braden Smith was right there watching, learning, just grasping, and it should pay off for Gonzaga next year to have had a point guard who, while he has not played in this system in game action, he has learned it better than most players who come into a new system, and I think that'll help him hit the ground running next year for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. And a special shout out to those of you hanging out live with us here. I always appreciate it having you here live. We'll be live again on Friday. Not sure the time because it depends on if we get any breaking news for this Gonzaga team, but we'll have one more show for you this week. And we may continue to do these live shows going into next week as well. It's been a lot of fun for me. I hope you guys enjoy hanging out and talking Zags hoops with us during the show. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And until Friday, as always, go Zags.